I'm Mariette DiCristina, and I'm the Dean of Boston University's College of Communication. I'm also an alum of COM, where I was a first-generation student and the parent of a recent BU grad. Welcome to today's event called After Hiring, Creating a Truly Inclusive Culture. This event is being recorded. Our expert panel will have a wide-ranging discussion around the ingredients for a truly inclusive culture. One special focus for us at COM, as it is throughout BU, is on improving our hiring practices to cultivate a more diverse pool of candidates and hires. After all, it's really important for our increasingly diverse body of students to see staff and faculty that look like them. It's important for all of us. But hiring is only the first step. How do we create a place where everybody truly feels welcome? A place where all of us can thrive? What are the ways we can each take action, whether it's as individuals or as employees and employers, as allies and as leaders? We hope the discussion today will prompt for you some reflection and provide inspiration for us all to help create a better world, one organization at a time. Our panel today will bring together several perspectives from the communication industry, from COM alumni, from what we're doing at COM itself as a college, and from a student perspective. Now it's my real genuine pleasure to introduce each of the speakers. I'm going to welcome each person, and then we'll hear initial thoughts from them after that. And after that, we'll start to take questions and answers. I hope you'll feel free to put your questions in the Q&A box at any time. First, let me welcome Janine Carter, who is an internationally recognized leader, consultant, facilitator, and speaker in the areas of diversity, equity, and inclusion, race, reconciliation, and cultural and systemic change. Across the span of her career, Janine has helped Fortune 500 companies, professional services and law firms, profit and not-for-profit organizations, and government agencies in a variety of capacities in implementing and managing large organizational DEI initiatives. She's held senior leadership positions at Deloitte and Touche, Denver Public Schools, Newmont Mining Corporation, and Facebook. And today, she continues her life's work as the founder and chief innovator of Inclusive Innovations, LLC. Welcome, Janine.
Thank you so much, Mariette. It's an honor to be here. As you know, and as is described in that long bio, I've been in the work for a very long time, over 26 years now. So I've seen lots of different things as it relates to diversity, equity, and inclusion. I've served as an external consultant to large corporations and not-for-profits, as you said. And then also I've been in internal lead roles as it relates to DE&I. And so there have been different strategies and tactics and tips that we have come up with to get at just what you described. How do you create an inclusive culture? This is actually organizational change and management work. It's systemic change work when you look at the workplaces. And there are lots of components and nuances to the work. Oftentimes what we do is we start with assessment. It's really, really important to understand what is going on within your organization. How are people feeling? What are the perceptions? What are the biases that exist? And that information, it's just really critical to feed that back up to leadership. From there, identifying what the gaps are of the people systems is oftentimes what you look at in terms of what is working, what is not working within the system, and then identifying solutions that help you with those problems. Education, as you all know, is crucial. So lots of people are now doing a lot of anti-racism work, diversity work, anti-bias work. That is really critical in terms of cascading the knowledge, the concepts, the different practices that you need to have in this space. And as we discussed when we were planning this, like, how do you measure success? What are the measurements? What is the accountability structure? Oftentimes you find just one person is responsible for all of those things that I just described. And so it's really important to look at the leadership ranks, who's doing what they're accountable for. And then the missing ingredient a lot of times, and most of you will not be shocked by this, is the employee voice and the diverse employee voice. So, you know, we get very, very busy. We start to go into action mode. We start to sort of implement these solutions. And then we forget to circle back and talk to the people who have been the most impacted by, you know, the different systemic inequities that exist. So that's sort of a methodology that I've used many, many times in the organizations that I've worked with. It's been nuanced, it's been changed, given the industry, given some of the other problems that exist within the org. But overall, that is an approach that we've been able to take. And so part of what I know we wanted to do is offer up potential solutions for people to consider within their organizations. I think now is, we have an extraordinary opportunity. This is an inflection point. Many, many people, you know, unfortunately, did not know that racism has existed for hundreds of years, for instance. So that's one of the isms that has really come to the forefront, that I'm seeing a lot of corporations, you know, really want to address. And so people are really in action mode. And I think that the both and of pausing, reflecting, doing some self-reflection on our own biases. How did we get here? You know, how, you know, reflecting on the how did we get here, I think is really important. And then looking at the different actions. So those are just some of the thoughts that are top of mind for this conversation. Wanted to offer that up, and I hope that we can have a fuller conversation about some of the topics. Thanks so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Thanks so much, Janine. That was a lot of great stuff to think about. I think you saw me looking down every so often taking notes, because a lot of great points in there. Now I'd love to welcome Anthony Harrison, who is passionate about the power of words, which I love when he uses them so well, as he does. He loves a well-turned phrase and the impact of a powerful story, which brought him to public relations more than 20 years ago. He's a 1981 graduate of Boston University's College of Communication, and his career has been built on telling powerful and compelling stories about everything from telephones, where he worked with Verizon, to lattes, worked with Starbucks, to Mickey Mouse and Disney, and from the paper of record, the New York Times, and the world's best-known software, Microsoft, and most recently, the largest social network on the planet, Facebook. Welcome, Anthony. So glad you're here.
Oh, thank you so much, Maria. I appreciate it. Like Janine, I am super excited to be here. It's been such a gift to be able to have these conversations and to you know, share my voice and my perspective on this. I had the absolute pleasure to partner with Janine at Facebook on providing comm support for a lot of the DE&I initiatives that she was driving for Facebook. I've recently started a new role at a new company called Anaplan, which is at the other end of that journey. They are a young company, a small company. And in fact, earlier today, I was part of their first sort of gathering as a employee resource group for Black employees. And so the contrast between, you know, Facebook, who has been doing this work for 5 or 6 years, and Anaplan that's been doing it for 5 or 6 months. And I think what I take away from that is you got to start, right? You can't postpone it. You can't wait for the right time. You have to jump in. You have to have those uncomfortable conversations with your employees, your peers, your coworkers. You have to be vulnerable. We all have to be vulnerable in terms of, you know, acknowledging what we don't know, and what we want to learn. But I think it's also important that we put in the work, and that is all of us. So we don't, if we are members of the majority, whether that is the gender majority or the racial majority or any majority, that we don't expect the people in the minority to educate us. We need to do the work ourselves. As a man, I've needed to understand the challenges of being a woman navigating in this world. And so just as I was born trying to figure out how to navigate what it's like to be a Black man and to be a gay man in this world. You know, we need to try to understand and walk in other people's shoes, hear other people's truths, listen to what other people have to say, and have respect for that. I've said to many individuals, excuse me, in organizations, you need to start by getting your own house in order before you look outside and you think about what could be better as a society necessarily. You need to look at your own house, your own company, your own organization, look around at your employees and your peers, and have those tough conversations about where you are today as an organization and where you need to go, and how important it is to start that journey right away. Again, I can't emphasize enough the willingness to have those uncomfortable conversations, and to be vulnerable. But it is also exciting, right? It feels good when you connect, when you share experiences, where you understand experiences, when you learn. And so to focus on that positive outcome, and you know, where this journey is going to take you, even though at some point it might feel awfully dark in front of you and behind you, but to sort of think about, you know, the light that comes with self-awareness, the light that comes with understanding and really deeply, you know, ingesting someone else's experience and how it differs from yours, and how knowing that makes you and that person better and stronger together than you were as individuals. You know, we talk a lot about, you know, the power of diversity and what happens when you bring people with different backgrounds and different points of views and different experiences together to make things happen. And that's super, super powerful, right? And being comfortable with agreeing to disagree, right? Like, you know, it doesn't mean that we all agree on the same things, but I think it does mean that we respect those differences and we don't dismiss those differences. We don't dismiss other people's experiences. We don't dismiss other people's, you know, view of things. We seek to understand. We seek to find a common ground is something I always try to do with people who have a different experience than I do. You know, and that common ground comes from being open and honest, as well as listening to what other people have to say, right? And not jumping to conclusions, and letting them have their conversation, letting them speak their truth, letting them, you know, talk about their experience, and asking a simple question: help me understand why you feel that way, because I don't understand that. And, you know, coming from a place of help me. You know, I think that kind of vulnerability is essential. I have been, I am of a generation where I started my career, what we now call code switching, you know, where my job was to make other people comfortable with me as a Black gay man, in many ways to downplay that. And we're now at a point where I don't have to do that. And I think, you know, younger people, you know, never had to do that, right? They never had to play that game, right? They came to this journey with that authenticity, which I admire and am humbled by, because it took me a while to learn how to be that way. And so I think one of the things I've learned so deeply these last couple of months is, you know, the difference of the experience of younger people of color from my own experience, and how I can learn from that, and how I can open my mind and see things differently, right? You know, and so even though I am a person of color, there is so much I can still learn about this experience, because everyone's experience is different. So, you know, I look forward to the questions and the conversation, and I'm so glad that COM is doing this, and I'm a proud Terrier COM alum.
Thanks, Anthony. That was fantastic. Now it's my pleasure to introduce the next speaker. As COM's Associate Dean of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion, Michelle Sullivan works to ensure that that culture of inclusion in which all individuals are valued takes effect. She strives to create an equitable environment that recruits, supports, and retains a diverse community of students, faculty, and staff. Michelle is a first-generation college student, COM alum, and a 2015 inductee in the Society of Distinguished Alumni. After graduation, she worked on brands including Starbucks and Legal Seafoods. Michelle spent most of her career in the beer industry, working on Samuel Adams and helping to launch the craft beer revolution. As a woman in a male-dominated industry, she faced many obstacles, but eventually became head of marketing, catapulting Twisted Tea to a multi-million-dollar case market leader, and developing and launching Truly Hard Seltzer. In 2017, Michelle returned to COM, where she teaches advertising, marketing, and branding, and we're so lucky to have her. Welcome, Michelle.
Thank you so much, Mariette. It's so great to be here with everyone this afternoon. Thanks to my fellow panelists. It's been great to work with all of you leading up to the event. It's so humbling to be here with strong female leaders. Mariette, Janine, Naima. I'm so in awe of you, Naima, as a student leader. So wonderful to be here with you. And I've heard Anthony's name throughout the halls of COM pretty much every day since I returned in 2017. So it's just wonderful to have you here as a leader as well, Anthony. Thank you all so much. The professor in me is going to share just a few slides with you, actually. I prepared just a few slides. I thought what I would do is start a little more broadly and use some examples of what we're doing here in COM, but broad examples that could apply to organizations really of any shape outside of our four walls here in the College of Communication, and then also share some specific actions that we have taken in COM to create a more inclusive environment, because we're aware that there are many COM alum, students, faculty, and just friends of the College of Communication who will be interested to know in our specific actions. We are moving way beyond the philosophy and the talk and moving to action. So we did not want to miss the opportunity to share some of that with you. So I'm going to share my screen now, folks. Sorry about that. Hang on just a moment. Went to the wrong place. Okay, there we go. I apologize. It's not a good meeting unless we have a Zoom snafu, right? So let me just put this into presentation mode. So very quickly, a couple of the general principles that I think are critically important in terms of building an inclusive culture, COM and beyond. First of all, I'd say it starts with the leadership. It has to be genuine and authentic. You know, the leadership of your organization, whether you're working for a for-profit organization, a nonprofit organization, a big company, a small company, if your leadership is committed to diversity, equity, and inclusion, and is willing to combine that with action, it will be much easier to foster that through all the rest of the employees and to make people who bring diverse perspectives feel included and feel valued. I think oftentimes in corporations and organizations that are lagging behind, we see that it gets labeled as, well, that's something that the human resources folks worry about, or that's, you know, that's Michelle's job over there. And that is certainly misguided thinking. So, you know, for me, when I think about what does it take really to achieve inclusivity in an organization, it does begin with leadership, as most critical, mission critical agenda items would in an organization. in an institution, in a corporation, I would certainly put inclusivity on that list as well. So in terms of an example here in COM, you know, this is one of the things that our leader has done recently. She has written to students about Black Lives Matter, and has put our values as the College of Communication forward, letting our students know what COM stands for. Marriott has actually also met with every student who has personal opinions and ideas to share on this topic. I know that she's actually sent some candidates back on faculty searches that have been put forward to her, saying that, you know, we're really looking for more diverse perspectives and more diverse point of views. So it's sort of that engagement and action combined here that are really making a difference in the leadership here in COM, but I think equally applicable to wherever you're coming from. So I would also say, you know, a key to inclusivity is making the business case. We've talked about this in the world of sustainability and in the world of corporate social responsibility for many decades. And I think it's now time that we can begin to make the business case for inclusivity, diversity, and equity. And that business case is certainly there to be made. In the case of COM, we know that the media landscape is shifting. We know that the top media outlets on the planet are changing, and they're demanding that they bring more diversity into the newsroom. And so COM, as an institution that is training those journalists, those public relations professionals, those advertising professionals, in order to stay on the cutting edge of the industry, we obviously need to be able to attract a diverse student pool and a diverse faculty pool. So really, you know, we have the great reputation here in COM as being a place that these newsrooms, these ad agencies, these PR agencies come for top talent. I was speaking to an alum yesterday, and she said that she was able to get an interview without someone even looking at her resume, because she said, "Oh, you're a COM alum. I know you're going to be good. Just come on in. I want to talk to you." So to keep up that reputation, we really need to stay you know, where the industry is moving. So that's sort of the business case from the COM perspective. There's a lot of research out there that would say, from a corporate perspective, as the demographics change, it really is the companies that that are changing to reflect the current population in terms of innovation, and have those diverse points of view at the table, sharing those who are staying ahead of their competition. McKinsey has done a lot of research that points to this, as has Harvard Business School. And McKinsey's also done a lot of research that says that companies who have an inclusive culture perform better than those who don't. And they would say that that sort of is tied to employees performing better, feeling like they want to put more forward. So there is a business case to be made for this, for sure. I think this one's pretty important, making sure that diverse point of views are amplified and acted upon, not just expressed. So this one, to me, you know, again, stems from wanting to make sure that we have the right people in the room, but that actions are taken. It's not philosophically, let's make sure we have the right people in the room, but that actions are taken, so that people can see that when I'm here participating, what I'm putting forward is truly valued. It has to go beyond just having the right people in the room. I think that's the phrase that we've used for a long time, right? The right people in the room. But to me, it's more about the right people in the room and having their actions and their opinions actually move forward and be valued through moving forward and through adoption by the organization and the institution. And then just to sort of sum up, I wanted to just share with you, knowing that you have an interest in what's happening, not just in inclusivity globally, but here in COM specifically. We've done several things recently that we've completed in terms of talking to our students to find out how we can better create an inclusive environment here in COM, with a quantitative study that we've just completed. We've established graduate and undergraduate committees who are fostering DEI within the student body and consulting to Mariette and I about how to improve inclusivity and comm. Naima is one of the leaders of that effort, and you'll hear from her next. We also have Naima and her counterpart on the graduate level who participate in our faculty diversity, equity, and inclusion meetings. And that's critical because as we sit there as faculty and staff members, thinking about how we can best serve our students and create a more inclusive culture, we have Naima and Olenka, who is her grad counterpart, there to tell us if we're on the right track and actually doing that. We are actively seeking diverse speakers with diverse points of view from many affinity groups to participate in events across the college, as well as having events that speak specifically to different topics about diversity in the field of communication. We've launched social media channels on Facebook and Instagram. So if you're not following the COM DEI channels, we would love to have you there. We also invited a range of speakers to come to our faculty meetings a few years ago when we were really getting our DEI efforts across the college launched. And that was very helpful for us to hear firsthand stories. As Anthony would tell us, the storytelling is very important. We have a DEI representative on all faculty search committees so that we really are putting our action into the searches. And we have actually put diversity, equity, and inclusion language into all of our fall syllabi now, so that as soon as a student gets into the classroom to take a new class, they are immediately aware of what our values are in this area within the College of Communication, and that everybody knows that they are welcome and valued here in COM. This is just a little bit of a visual slide showing some of the great events that we've had recently, more coming up all the time. So hopefully you'll be following and joining us for more of these now that you're here today. And then importantly, what's in progress? Mariette talked about this, I've talked about it a bit, so I'm not gonna go through every action we're taking. You can read sort of the bullet points here yourself, but we do have a very high priority focus right now on recruiting more diverse faculty and staff across the college who do better represent the faces and the voices of our students. That's something that we're putting a lot of energy behind and believe in very deeply. We're also working to update our curriculum so that we have a more diverse focus in the classroom on what the students are reading, what the students are learning, what the students are discussing. And we're putting together a database, a roster, if you will, of diverse guest speakers, people who could bring different points of view to the classroom that all of our faculty can access, so that anybody who wants to invite somebody, and they may not have that person in their network, but they're thinking, oh, it would be great to have an international point of view come to my class on this topic. Or, you know, I would love to have somebody like Anthony speak from a PR point of view in a PR class. They can access that. We're also putting together a diversity career fair, and we have hosted webinars for all of our new incoming undergraduates, graduates, and transfer students. So again, just as people join us here in the College of Communication, they know that all are welcome, what our values are, and we're encouraging them to participate and join us in creating an inclusive culture, so that everybody knows that, that we welcome their participation and that all voices are valued here in COM. I'll leave it there for now, Mariette, and pass it over to Naima.
Thanks a bunch, Michelle. Maybe you need to stop sharing your screen.
Yes.
All right.
No, that's great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Now I'd love to, and it was great, Michelle, thank you so much. Now I'd love to welcome Naomi Wilson and introduce her. Naomi is a rising senior who's studying advertising within COM. Since transferring from Syracuse University to BU during her sophomore year, she's made amplifying underrepresented voices a personal mission in an attempt to make BU's campus more inclusive environment. She started this journey by joining the executive board of the Minority Connection Initiative, or MCI, in fall 2018. And there she founded the organization's radio show at WTBU, our student radio station, and reestablished MCI's hashtag BU in Color series while serving as public relations chair and later vice president. She continued her DEI work across campus and joining BU Hillel's Social Justice Fellowship and later founded the COM DEI student group, where she now serves as the organization's president. In her free time, whenever she has it, she enjoys traveling and engaging with different cultures, and she shares this passion with others by documenting and posting her experiences on her self-titled food and travel blog. Welcome, Naima.
Hello, it's such an honor to be sitting amongst you all as such distinguished leaders. As a student today, thank you so much again for having me. You know, as a student, as a peer, as a leader, and as an employee, one thing that I have recognized is that we are all born with, the vast majority of us are all born with our certain sets of privileges, and privilege, I like to say, acts as blinders. And so it takes a lot of effort and education in order to really learn about the experiences of others who live outside of our own communities. And I would like to say that education is where my DEI journey, especially as a leader, really started. And it began right there in my freshman year at college, where I took a course called Race and Ethnic Inequalities while studying at Syracuse University. And what it did is it really equipped me with the vocabulary and the language to not only document and express my own experiences as, you know, a cisgendered heterosexual woman of color, but also, you know, to be able to actually articulate the experiences of others and advocate for them there where I can. And so what I like to do with the student group, and going off of what Janine said, and really finding the employee voice when you're in a certain institution or corporation, is by being a part of student groups and being a leader here, I really like to emphasize the student voice and try to articulate that as best as possible to serve as a representative to the broader community and figure out ways in which that we can make it as diverse and inclusive of a space as possible. And it's been such a great time being able to do that work here at BU's campus, who does, you know, a pretty great job, but, you know, there's definitely so much work here in 2020 to still continue to push the needle forward, you know, not only just here at BU, but just in broader society. So it's really quite an honor, and I love doing this work. I don't think that it's, I don't really see it as an option to do otherwise, because it's a necessity. It's a part of the experience that I live every single day. So, you know, I enjoy it, and thank you so much for having me again.
So glad you're here. And it's really inspiring also to all of us, I think, to take on the mission, let's call it, of, you know, this is not an option. You know, we all have a part we can play, and to really, you know, to echo what you were just saying, Naima, to try to really understand how somebody else's, you know, what somebody else's perspective is like, which just takes some work, but totally worth it work.
For sure.
So I want to encourage folks to feel free to put their questions in the Q&A, and I'll start diving in there quite soon. I see some things have started to perk in, but just to kick things off, and I guess this is a question, especially for Janine and Anthony, but maybe for the others as well, if you'd like. You know, Janine, you made the comment that we're at an inflection point, and I think that I've heard that before, and it really rings true for me. So what's your advice so we don't miss this amazing opportunity to affect change? I remember the 60s so well. Some of us here remember the 60s. And, you know, we made some steps, but I think a lot of us were unsatisfied with what happened then and since then. So how can we make it really count now?
Yeah, I've spent a lot of time thinking about this, obviously, every single day. You know, upon me deciding to start another company is when this happened, in this space. So I've gotten a chance to talk, you know, 24/7, it feels like, with many, many people about this. And for most, they feel that this is an inflection point. I think what we need to do with this window is not default into either apathy or we're too busy, we have these other priorities. I think that oftentimes is what happens, within the workplace. And then, we have a pandemic that we're also living through. And so it's keeping this front of mind. The difference is we all saw what occurred on the media, right? And so, we can't deny that this has happened. And I think that visual, at least for me, is never going to leave my mind and my heart. And so I think, keeping it front of mind, as painful and horrific as it is, really continuing to do the steps. Michelle, I really appreciate all of the things that you all have, and Mariette, all the things you have going on, at the leadership level at BU. And I know Anthony and Naima, you helped to create that as well. But it's sticking to it is what we really have to do. And, I used to think that I wanted to work myself out of a job, or that I would be out of doing this work. And instead, it just continues. So those are some of the things just front of mind from more of an emotional and passionate place. Systemically, when we talk about systemic change, I really want to give a couple of double click examples of what I mean. When I say, going from assessment, what I mean is when you come out of an assessment process of understanding what the problems are, really making sure that those are the root problems, communicating those to the people with power and influence that can affect the change, and then looking at the systems that guide what's happening with people, all people. And so, for instance, would be, what are we doing as it relates to career development for all people within the institution? And are we making sure that our underrepresented members are also getting that? Sometimes these systems are not implemented equitably. And so I know I'm preaching to the choir, but it's really like double clicking on the work. And what I was super excited about in terms of working with this group and CALM is the communications function in most corporations, in all corporations, is critical to this work. And that's why I'm so excited that I got to work with Anthony on this, because he and his team were able to help us tell the story of what we were doing. So that transparency of what we're doing is really, really important too, because, and you would tell me this, what do people do if you're not filling the gaps in terms of your story, right? So we make things up. They're not actually doing what they're saying they're doing. They're not actually doing the things that Michelle just showed on the slides. So continuing to do the action that you've committed to and continuing to message where you are on the journey is really, really important. So those are the things that I would, offer up to this audience just initially.
Thanks a million.
Yeah, I would definitely piggyback on that last point in particular, Janine, about continuing to talk about the progress or lack of progress or the challenge to progress, so that people don't have the ability to fill in the gaps that they may see or perceive with their own narrative, right? So, you can never, as a communicator, you can never over communicate. You can change the way you communicate so that you're not just saying the same thing over and over. And that's our challenge as communicators, to think about how we do that creatively through different channels and different ways. But you definitely, you need to communicate consistently, regularly about progress. And as I said, lack of progress, because transparency is critical in terms of getting people to sort of, support what's happening and believe what's happening. I also, because I'm sure there are a lot of people that are thinking or asking, what can I as an individual do, right? So I'm not a leader, I'm not a CEO, I'm not a senior level person. Like, what can I do? And I think what all of us can do is to keep this conversation front and center. I think one of the reasons this is an inflection point is because you see people having these discussions that never talked about this before. You see people asking questions. You see people seeking to understand. And I think those discussions need to continue. And so I think as an individual, have the conversation that might feel awkward and uncomfortable to at least start the dialogue with someone. Don't jump into the deep end of the pool with someone that you may have a casual working relationship with and say, tell me how you've been discriminated against. But have the conversation around, tell me what your experience has been like. Tell me how you're feeling, and be vulnerable and say, like, I'm feeling really crappy. I'm feeling really unsettled. I'm feeling really nervous, anxious. And lead with your own truth, lead with your own experience, because change happens one person at a time, one conversation at a time. And that's what I think we can each do as individuals, is to have those conversations, to seek to understand other people's experiences, and to continue the conversation, even if it is uncomfortable or scary. But I think that's what each of us as individuals can do. And I think that is happening, but it's keeping that happening and keeping those conversations happening, and moving them forward and having them with new people. So that individually, I think that's what we all can do.
And I would just add to that just real quickly, Mariette, I know you have other questions and there might be questions in the audience. What I find is that people need some framework for this because it's so behemoth. And so, what Anthony and I just described is for some, they didn't know what they didn't know. And then this happened, for instance, using the George Floyd example. And now they're on that step of, they know what they didn't know before. So there's these things called steps to new awareness. You've probably used it in different contexts. But we went from know what we didn't know. Now we know what we didn't know what we didn't know. Now we know what we didn't know. And then the next stage is, we know what we know, but we can't quite apply what we're learning successfully. So the importance of having these conversations is that you're getting deeper and deeper in understanding and awareness. You're also learning different skill sets and hopefully different behaviors, so that next time, you might behave differently with whatever the situation is that might be occurring. So it is a progression of new awareness. It's a new muscle for many to practice. When we're working out, we need to keep, working out. I haven't been doing much of that lately, but anyway, that's a different story. And then you get to conscious competence. In this work, it's really important to remain conscious. We don't want to get to the next step, which is just do it, because then you're unconscious again. And then what will happen is you bounce back to you don't know what you don't know. And so we want to remain conscious in this. So that's another model and progression that I have found for clients makes it make a little bit more sense.
Just related to this, thank you, Janine and Anthony. I would like to pick up just a little bit more on this, on a similar theme, perhaps. Michelle, when you were talking, you mentioned that a lot starts with leadership, and we were just talking about, and I love this framework idea where, we're taking steps together to a new awareness and acknowledging that we're at different points in that spectrum of understanding, even though the need for inclusion and being equitable and diversity is more in the, the cultural zeitgeist. There are still individuals at different places. So, Michelle, I don't know. I'm sure you've thought about this. I know I have too, and I'd love to hear from anybody on the panel as well. How do you approach somebody who just doesn't get it? We've all run into them. They mean well. They say things. You go like this. What do you do?
Yeah, I think that's a challenge. I would always encourage people to figure out how that person ticks. So when I run into somebody who doesn't get it, on this issue of inclusion or on any issue particularly, you know, I always try to think about what is going to motivate this particular individual, what's their communication style, and in some ways, you know, what's in it for them, what's going to resonate with them, what is going to interest them in this topic, and how can I really get them engaged in this topic. I also think, you know, Anthony hit on a key point in the beginning, which is around storytelling. You know, for some people, the what's going to resonate with them will be real life stories. You know, we'll be hearing about specific individuals here in our college who have faced microaggressions or discrimination, and really being able to not talk about those issues in generalities, but really say this happened to X student and give a specific example. So the storytelling can be very impactful to certain individuals. To other individuals, they might be more motivated by the data. So sharing with them the quantitative study that our colleague Li Gao has just completed. So I think when I run into somebody in this area or in any area, in business or in life where they don't get it, I try to figure out like how would you crack that nut on an individual basis? And it could be through storytelling, it could be through data, it could be through lots of different means, but trying to figure out, you know, what is really the key to having them get the aha moment. Because you're right, it's for every individual, it's not necessarily the same answer for different people.
I love that thought, because, you know, you boiled it, for me anyway, you boiled it down to a communication problem. You know, whenever we're trying to bridge the gap with anybody to help them understand, which is really what communication does anyway, you have to understand a bit what the other person is motivated by, and how, you know, how your both of your goals can be seen to align. So I love that. I have one follow-up for Naomi as well, and then there's a question in the Q&A I'd like to get to next. Naomi, as I said before, I was really inspired by the idea of that it's just not an option, and I love the energy that expresses, because I think there's a natural, you know, potential there for fatigue, and you know, for the person who's feeling like it's not an option, and I worry from the other end of things as well. How can we make sure that those student voices do get heard? What are some of the best ways to help you all, you know, be heard at all levels?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think, you know, the comm talks that took place a few years ago, where people belonging to certain underrepresented communities came in and honestly just willingly shared their stories with faculty and staff. Like, I think the firsthand storytelling definitely works if we're talking about modes of communication to people who are open and willing to listen or curious. And data, I think, is really effective for those who might just not know, or may not just that click. It can start to align things into perspective. So I think, yeah, in regards to students, just giving us opportunities to actually have a microphone and amplify our voices is honestly a really good first step. It's the assessing point, you know, to bounce back off of some things that Janine has said before earlier. And to speak about fatigue, I mean, it's a thing that a lot of people who do social justice work or any sort of diversity, equity, and inclusion work do experience. And I think that it's not, even though we're at an inflection point in our current society, I don't think this journey is going to be over anytime soon. So I think you really do have to buckle up with some endurance and know that you're in it for the long haul. And if you as a person, like, prioritize mental health, because, you know, you can't pour from an empty cup. So if people, either yourself or others on your team, you know, need to take a break and then just, you know, tab me back in, then when I'm ready to go, then I'm ready to go again. So I think that it's just important to pick and choose your battles, essentially, and know that we're kind of in it for the long haul. So it's a little bit more of an endurance race instead of a sprint. Keeping that mindset for sure.
I love that metaphor of can't pour from an empty cup. And also, I think a theme I'm hearing just so much is awareness of others around us, of ourselves and kind of where we are, and generally paying attention and maybe listening more as well. Let me turn to a question that's come into the Q&A, which I think might be an opportunity for Anthony a bit, but perhaps others as well. The question is DEI as a university-wide priority and effort, or is it localized to each school and college? Though I'd imagine there would be natural collaboration across schools regardless. And the person says, thank you, you're welcome.
Yeah, no, happy to talk about that. One of the things that Mariette did not mention is I'm going to be stepping into the role as president of the BU Alumni Council next year. And so in that role, I get to interact with, you know, folks at the university-wide level as well as the work I do at the comm level. And there is some really amazing stuff going on at the university level. Crystal Williams, who is the vice president, I believe, of DEI at the university. I just spoke to her actually this week. She's got some really exciting things that she's got in the queue coming up. She is primarily focused on helping to increase the diversity amongst the faculty and staff across the university. That is her focus. But she obviously works closely with Dean Elmore in terms of the student activities and student support for students of color and stuff like that. And also just recently, the university named Andrea Taylor, who is a trustee of the university, an amazing, dynamic, inspirational woman of color that I am in awe of every time I'm with her, to a new role on staff at the university to sort of spearhead these efforts across the entire university, student, faculty, staff, and really sort of be the voice for all of this work in conjunction with Crystal, in conjunction with the individual deans at the individual college level, in conjunction with the Alumni Association. So she's gonna be, in my mind, playing air traffic control. And as a former trustee, she's connected to the board and to the leadership of the university. So, you know, the things she sees, the things she's going to be talking about, the trustees will hear, President Brown will hear. So there's a voice at the highest level of the university around these issues, and she's tapped into what's happening on the street in both ways. So I'm personally like super excited about the things that are going on, the things that I think all of us, whether we're alumni or faculty or staff or students, are going to see openly talked about and discussed at the university over the next couple of years. And everyone that I've spoken to does see this as a marathon and not a sprint. And, you know, this is something, as Janine alluded to, this is something that we as people of color have been dealing with for over 400 years. And so, you know, if we have the energy to continue the battle, everyone else should have the energy to continue the battle.
I'd like just add also that Andrea Taylor, who Anthony was talking about, is a comm alum. And until recently was a member of my Comm Dean's Advisory Board. So I'm sorry to lose her, but happy for the reason that I'm, you know, we're losing her as an advisory board member at Comm. And also for the person who asked the question, BU now has the good fortune of working with Dr. Ibram X. Kendi, who is heading the new Center for Anti-Racist Research. And it's racial data tracker, collecting data around inequitable situations all over the country and world in a variety of themes. And we're working with them from the comm perspective as well about how do we collaborate together. So that's another, I think Dr. Kendi just joined over the summer, and you know, I can't wait to see what will happen next. So we still have a few minutes left, and here's a question saying, has the school considered creating a multicultural office to serve as an umbrella for all of these activities? If you mean school as COM, I haven't thought to do that yet, to be honest. I am not sure whether that might be part of any university conversations at this point. Don't know if, Anthony, if you have heard anything different or otherwise.
No, I think, you know, the school at the university level is really focused on, as I alluded to earlier, really kind of taking a look at our own house and where we can do better across the board, and how we can build that into the fabric of the university. You know, still doing, I think, to Janine's point, that assessment piece of where are the problems, what are the things we need to address, and how do we systematically start to work at that. So I think there's still some assessment going on, you know, which is what you need to do before you then move into what are the actions and the programs and stuff like that.
I would just add that if there's anything that's like that in my mind existing already and has been for a while, but it's in a new home, it's the Howard Thurman Center for Common Ground, which is just a great place to go, to learn, to share perspectives. And as the director has said to me, it could be located in a better place near the BU Bridge, sort of, you know, symbolically joining things together. So that's one thing you might want to check out. And let's see, we have 3 questions left, and I see there's another question that's just come in. Let's see if we have time to answer this one. Okay. I heard D&I efforts for a very non-diverse staff, or I head it. As we work on our hiring process, in the meantime, how do we protect the few minority members we do have to avoid them from feeling the weight of educating others? Storytelling is hard in a small organization where things can't stay anonymous. Janine, do you want to offer any?
Yeah, I can quickly address that. I think that one approach that I've seen work is coupling the themes that you're able to glean from the few employees. So roll it up to a thematic level, and then add the research. So do an external, internal summary. And so that way you can keep the responses anonymized. And then if there are certain characteristics about the stories that would, you know, attribute the stories to the people, you know, trying to adapt those a little bit without losing the point. But that's one way to do it. There's so much external research that supports a lot of what employees are saying, and then just making sure that you're sourcing that external research as well. So that's one approach.
Thanks so much, Janine. We still have 2 minutes, so I have one kind of challenge question for all of you, but it's not a big challenge. If you could think about if there was one thing you'd love people who've been watching and listening along to take away from this conversation, what would that be? Anybody who feels like it can start.
I'll start. Be empathetic and listen and talk. You know, whether that's a neighbor, someone you see at the gym, just you know, hear someone else's story, because that's how we grow as a community and a society, is that we hear and understand and embrace other people's stories, because we all have stories.
Piggyback off of what he said, I do think storytelling is a critical part of it, since we're all human and it really gets down to the humanity of all of our experiences that we share. But I would also say, if you're here and you're sitting and listening at this conversation, then you're probably already very open and curious and inclined to do this sort of work. I think education, honestly, is the great equalizer, like in many forms and aspects of our society, but especially in DEI work. So if there's something that you're not akin to, or that you're not super aware of, just go back home, try to self-educate if you can. Read a new book, listen to a podcast, engage with a new type of story or community, and then I really do think making progressive change and shifting a culture is all in the nuances and in the norms. And we as people can spark change in our communities by just being what we want to see. Yeah, it's very nuanced, it's very small, but if we make it and include it into our daily lives, I truly do think that's how you change your culture.
And I'll just jump in. Is that okay, Michelle?
Of course.
I echo the sentiments of my colleagues, and I would just say that one of the things we haven't talked a lot about is community engagement. So a lot of conversations I'm having with C-suite, level folks, where we land is usually, a lot of the answers are right around you. It's right in front of us. So, engaging, to what Anthony and Naeem have already said, engaging with people who are different than yourself, gaining more exposure, immersing in the community, and understanding what the needs are of the community and getting involved in that way, that will go a long way in terms of learning and heightening your awareness and your ability to engage in these conversations.
Mm-hmm. A lot of what my fellow panelists said today really resonated with me. Naima talked about being in it for the long haul, and Anthony said, we've been working on this for 400 years, and we can work on it for the long haul. We can all be in it together. And Janine talked about communicating to power and influence, and all of those things I think come together for me very well. And I would sort of say that it's up to us to all push forward to the extent that we all personally can. And I think we have a lot of reason to be optimistic. Change can happen quickly in this country. Anthony, you talked about, being an African-American gay man and how at one time that seemed exceptional. And, it doesn't seem to be really an outlier anymore. And I remember, I grew up in the 70s and the 80s, and, a stay-at-home dad would have seemed different then. It's not different anymore. So, there is a lot of cultural change that can happen quickly when we, the citizens, are able to really have our voices heard and, as Janine said, communicate to power and influence. And as Naima said, really stick with it for the long haul and push forward. We can make the change happen. And I think we're not going to wait another 400 years. We're going to make it happen much more quickly than that.
One last point before we close, or Marietta closes, and this is a Facebookism that you see on the walls all the time. Assume good intent. Assume that the other person is coming from a good place, as opposed to demonizing them or thinking they're bad because they're different than you.
Yeah, that's all great advice. I mean, I'm super grateful. I hope everybody joins me in, virtual thanks for our amazing speakers and panelists. I'm going to actually quote Anthony, because I love this so much before. Change happens one person at a time, one change in a time. And maybe if we do, assume that good intent, we will all get there. I don't think maybe, I misspoke. I meant definitely. Thanks again so much to all of you for joining today, and hope the rest of the day is a good one.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks for being here. Bye-bye.